In the beginning, there were not many gods. There were only forces. And two of the most ancient were these: Eros, desire, longing, the spark of life itself, and Thanatos, death, silence, the breath that stops when time is done. But what if these two were never enemies? What if they were lovers entangled not in opposition, but in a dance deeper than breath, deeper than body, deeper than soul? What if death is not the end of love? What if it is the consummation of longing itself? In Greek thought, myth and mind were never separate. Philosophers spoke in poetry. Poets whispered truths the mind could not bear. And in this forgotten space between logic and myth, they left behind a philosophy most of us have forgotten. The philosophy of Eros and Thanatos. A truth too beautiful and too terrifying to say aloud. Tonight, we remember it. Chapter 1. The first two forces, Eros and Thanatos, in the birth of the cosmos. Before the gods had names, before the stars found their places, there were only two forces. Eros, love, Thanatos, death. According to Hesiod, in the beginning was chaos, then came Gaia, and then Eros, not as a god of lust, but as the power that drew things together. Eros was the force that made union possible. Thanatos, the force that made return inevitable. One calls us forward, the other calls us back. But the ancients never saw these as enemies. They were brothers, twins, or even lovers, depending on who told the story. Between them, the universe pulses. Everything that longs to live will someday long to die. And everything that dies leaves behind a longing to return. Chapter 2. Desire as creation. The secret power of Eros in ancient thought. Eros is not a feeling. Eros is a force. It is the hunger for what is not yet real. It is what moves stars to collide. What makes atoms bind. What stirs the unborn to stir in the womb. The pre-Socratic thinkers did not laugh at Eros. They feared him, revered him. For Empedocles, Eros was not a god but a cosmic principle. Philotes, the force of attraction, of mixing, of softening the hardness of isolation. Without Eros, he wrote, nothing would ever change. But Eros is not gentle. He is fire wrapped in velvet. His love does not comfort, it consumes. In Eros, the self is undone, and from that undoing, something new is born. Chapter 3. Death as return. Thanatos and the beauty of completion. If Eros is the reaching, Thanatos is the releasing. Death is not the enemy of life. It is its mirror. In myth, Thanatos does not rage. He arrives silently, gently. A young man with folded wings, eyes like sleep. For the Greeks, Thanatos was not evil. He was inevitable and even beautiful when met without fear. In some versions of the myth, Thanatos is moved, he weeps when love is true. He pauses when passion burns, because he is not cruelty, he is completion. And in death, Eros often awakens again. Because what we love most is what we fear to lose. And that fear teaches us how deep the love truly was. Chapter 4. Plato and the erotic soul, longing for the beyond. In Plato's Symposium, Eros is not a god of bodies. He is a guide of souls. He begins with the beauty we see, but urges us toward a higher, eternal beauty. In Diotima's vision, Eros is the ladder, from flesh to thought, from desire to wisdom, from image to truth. And death? Death is the test, because in dying we discover, did our love point us toward the eternal, or did it trap us in shadows? For Plato, Eros is the path through death. If we have loved well, not possessively, but truthfully, the soul will ascend, and Eros will carry us beyond Thanatos, not because death was denied, but because it was loved through. Chapter 5. Mystery cults and sacred death, when love meets the afterlife. In the Eleusinian mysteries, death was not feared, it was initiated. The rites of Demeter and Persephone were not just seasonal myths. They were metaphors for the soul. The seed that dies becomes wheat. The soul that descends becomes wise. In these rites, Eros was the descent, the yearning that drew the soul underground. And Thanatos was the return, not to the world we left, but to the world we now see anew. Love and death were woven together, not as opposites, but as partners in a sacred dance. Only by dying could one truly love, and only through love could one return whole. Chapter 6, Freud, Jung, and the Shadow of Desire. Centuries after the gods fell silent, Eros and Thanatos were reborn, not in myth, but in the language of psychology. Freud named them both. The life instinct Eros driving Essex growth, attachment, and the death drive Thanatos, the silent urge for rest, stillness, destruction. But unlike the Greeks, Freud saw them as opposing instincts, locked in tension. And yet, even he admitted, the two are entangled. One drives us to create, the other to dissolve. And in the most intimate of moments, the two are often one. Jung, too, knew this dance. He spoke of the anima, the feminine soul, and the shadow, the feared, repressed death within. Love opens the door, but it is death who waits behind it. And perhaps the true transformation is when we stop fearing what we love and stop loving only what comforts us. Chapter 7, When Death Falls in Love, the philosophical union of opposites. What happens when Eros and Thanatos are no longer enemies? When we no longer see love as light and death as darkness, we begin to see what the ancients saw, that the deepest love leads us to the edge of self, where ego dies, where time halts, where surrender becomes truth. Thanatos is not cold when touched by Eros, and Eros is not blind when he walks with Thanatos. Together they lead the soul through a gate, not into nothingness, but into becoming. It is no accident that we call orgasm the little death. No accident that grief breaks us open to love. No accident that the most ecstatic moments leave us wordless. When death falls in love, time becomes sacred. Because nothing eternal is ever rushed, and all that truly lives must someday let go. Chapter 8. Why we are still afraid of love and still afraid of dying. We say we fear death, but often what we really fear is love. Because love asks us to die to self, to plans, to the illusion of control. And death asks us to remember how much we once loved. Both are teachers, both are mirrors. Both undo us, so that we might be remade. And in the ancient view, whether from philosopher or mystic, poet or priest, Eros and Thanatos were never strangers. They were two names for the same threshold, the place where life begins and ends and begins again. Closing reflection, the flame between Eros and Thanatos. If death has touched you, if grief has left your soul hollow, then you have walked where Eros and Thanatos meet. If love has undone you, if joy brought tears, if passion brought surrender, then you have stood at the gate, not to be consumed, but to be transformed. Love at its deepest prepares us for death, and death at its gentlest reminds us why we loved. Eros, Thanatos, together they are not an ending. They are a flame, burning between the worlds. And if you dare to enter it, you may never be the same again. If this story has touched something in you, if the flame still flickers in your chest, share this journey, subscribe, and return to the place where death once fell in love.